Another Friday, another new perspective for a JPGivin'er analysis, baby. Today, I'll be analyzing Yeehaw's perspective in a 6v6 between Boo Bombs and Princess Monarchy. I personally think Yeehaw played decently in the races he submitted, and while there are things to go over to help him improve, there are quite a few general things to point out as well that could help you, the viewer, improve just a bit more. As always, if you want your gameplay to be analyzed, join my Discord server and let me know. We'll take it to the DMs from there to talk about it, and the submission process is in the description. But without further ado, it's time to start Givin'er, bud. Just before getting started, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind. Starting things off, we have SNES Rainbow Road. I think out of the 3 races in this video, Yeehaw could have played a bit better in this race in particular. I'll be going more in depth on 2 situations Yeehaw went through, so let's see what happens. Alright, so you made it pretty clear in the call that you just couldn't get your hands on a single item for over a lap. Although it seemed like you were in a pretty tough spot because of how close the pack was, I still think you could have picked up a couple boxes from the 4 total item sets you missed. At the first set on lap 1, unfortunately, you were already at a disadvantage because you were in 7th going into the first set. The first set doesn't mean a whole lot in the long run, but only the 3 tight boxes got taken from the people in front of you, so you could have gone wide for one of the wide boxes. Who knows, maybe you could have benefited a lot from it if you pulled, say, a mushroom. At the second set, I think you should have gone for a wide box. It seemed like everyone in front of you was content with going as tight as possible, and especially since you were right in the middle of the pack, you should have spaced regardless, and you would probably pick up a box in the process. At the last set, you honestly should have gone for a tight box. I've mentioned this multiple times, but I'll say it again. One item is better than no item. Again, you were stuck in the pack, so it was next to impossible for you to easily snag the double box. Going for the wide single would be a guaranteed box, and you would still have a better chance at getting an item if you held tight. And we don't need to go into detail on the first set on lap 2. I think you know you could have gotten the second tightest box rather easily. Maybe the banana made you hesitate, but you could have easily gone inside its line after the item set. So yeah, I hope this helps you guarantee more items in your slots. Even so, you still managed to maintain a top spot afterwards, so good job on that. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about you bumping your teammate off, but I want to bring up another point I forgot to mention in my analysis last week. I went over why you should be cautious about throwing a blue, even if your team can dodge or block it, but here's another point to bring up. Your teammate had a horn in second, and because the blue homes in on first the moment it notices them, the blue will take whatever line it wants. As a result, the horn was useless, your teammate got blued, and you pushed him off. Now, there are solutions for what your mate in second could have done. They could have either A, gotten into first and ensured the blue went for them, or B, they could have spaced a lot to ensure that the blue wouldn't go around the horn radius. Being in second place with a horn is already a bad sign, as you have to put more effort into hoarding the blue. Generally speaking, protecting the horn is the best thing you can do, so try to let the guy with the horn in first, as long as it won't screw your team over too hard. As for bumping your teammate off, really the only thing you could have done is being proactive based on what you heard in the call after the blue situation. This would result in you going on the right of the swamp, but it was a tough spot for you overall and for your team as well. But either way, your team still got a really good race here, so good job. Next up is Wario Stadium. As usual, there are a few things to talk about regarding Yeehaw's decision making, both good and bad. One way or another, the information will be useful to all of you watching. Now, I already talked about the whole item boxes situation last race, so I'll keep this part brief. It was inevitable that your opponent in first would take the double box because A, they could use their coin and still get protection, or B, they could steal it from second place. Because you and your teammate were second and third, your opponent was most likely going to choose one of these options, and in this scenario, it was option B. You should have just positioned yourself toward a single box and called it a day, since the only chance you had at nailing a double box is if the guy in first lagged through it. While it looks like you could do nothing about getting hit by air here, there actually is a chance you could have survived this. While you did get hit by triple greens, had you done what I'm about to show you, while there is a chance you could be hit by those later on, you never know. Anyway, this could be a solid example as to how optimal driving can go a long way. You could have done the double SMT method here, which saves a solid amount of time compared to the single UMT method, especially before the glider, which is where you got trailed. It's a very solid strat, and I highly recommend learning it. But the point is, tweaking your driving like this could make a significant difference in your performance, and maybe could have had an impact on whether you would have gotten hit here or not. I really like that you used your golden immediately after realizing you had no use for it. This gave you a perfect opportunity to get the most out of your golden while still chaining into the following set. Generally speaking, goldens are a hit or miss situation, and getting a golden here was a miss without a doubt. Even so, you did get something out of it as you were able to use it through the ending shortcut. But the point is, good job on realizing that it wouldn't be worth it to hold your golden and fast enough so you still could chain into the following set. Now, just before moving on, I have no clue how this happened. You are definitely in the right by shrooming in the shortcut, don't get me wrong, but this is just such an awkward situation. I can't tell if your teammate hopped into the off-road or was just lagging, as this is a somewhat common occurrence where someone lags and looks like they're drifting in the off-road. You didn't lose too much by getting planted here, but just be aware that this does happen from time to time, and you wouldn't want that to ruin your race. Lastly, we have N64 Rainbow Road. Yeehaw made one play in particular that really helped his team out, which is pretty cool, but you already know we got a few things to talk about. Either way, he did play this race pretty well for the most part. Just a little something to mention here, you should focus more on drafting after the glider ramp than nailing an item box. Why? Because as you can see here, everyone on your screen goes through the item set, meaning you're guaranteed an item box pretty much no matter what. While it was a little tough for you to get a draft in this scenario, there's still a chance you could have gotten one before going off the glider ramp, but it's alright, as you were able to get a good enough draft to pop into first shortly after landing. It is nice that you acknowledge that your teammate asked you to let him pass since you had a red and he had a shroom. Or better yet, you had protection and he didn't. Unfortunately for him, you took action way too late and he paid the price. While gaining distance from the pack is really important, protecting your team is also really important. It's pretty clear what the solution here is. You should have slowed down a tiny bit, just enough to let your mate pass you, then you guys are good to go. Alternatively, your teammate could have shroomed past you and you wouldn't have to slow down at all. While you wouldn't have protection for a blue, taking control of the front is the most important thing you can do here. I'd say both options work really well. You slowing down a tiny bit or your mate shrooming up would have gotten the job done here. Alright, yes, this was a solid bomb snipe, and it paved the way for your team to win the race. And while nothing went wrong here, I do want to talk about throwing bombs forward in general. One thing that is really important to remember is that you should never risk throwing a bomb forward in a tight spot on the track, like say, the top path on Twisted Mansion. You had a ton of space here, which is why you could throw it with little to no repercussions. But that isn't always the case, and throwing bombs forward isn't always a safe option. Just keep that in mind, and you'll minimize the chance of you or your team getting screwed over by a failed attempt to land a bomb snipe on opponents ahead of you. Again, it was a perfectly fine idea to whip out your bomb here, so good job. And of course, good job on nailing first. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As for Yeehaw, my suggestions moving forward would be to try to be a bit more proactive, which will help save yourself and your teammates from sticky situations. This can also come in handy when trying to guarantee an item or two in the pack, as I mentioned earlier. Other than that, I think you played pretty decently in the races you submitted. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and keep on giving her, bud.